And now we're going to focus a little bit more on education. There's a lot to be thinking about as it relates to education, both what's going to happen while young adults are still enrolled in high school, and then what their wishes might be related to post-secondary education or lifelong learning. So as we think about who are partners in education, we think about obviously the family and young adults. School personnel, this could be the case manager for that young adult in the school systems. Many schools have what are called transition coordinators. It might depend on the size of your school district, but that's certainly something you want to ask if there's someone who has a specialty in transition. And then this is also a time when we would expect to see some involvement starting with someone from DVR or the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And again, different people may be part of the discussion and part of IEP meetings. So for example, if a family is participating in the children's waivers, you might ask your service coordinator to help and participate in that discussion. If they're over 17 and a half, Aging and Disability Resource Center might be involved. And then anybody else who is important in that young adult and family's life who can be helpful in the discussion. Sometimes families just ask a friend to come along to be a support and an advocate in discussions they're having about transition because there's a lot to be thinking about. So as we said earlier, transition planning can start at age 14. That's in the Wisconsin statute. And this is a time to get a better idea of, so what do schools have to do with transition and what does transition have to do with school? And to begin to think about what that young adult's long-term goals are. Are they interested in post-secondary education, for example? Are they interested in a job after school and what might that job look like? And then to talk about for example, classes they might need to take to meet that goal. And this is also a time when we're hoping young adults are really starting to participate actively in the process. And it may be that the structure of the IEP meeting may need to be modified a little bit so that that young adult can be present and participate. So for example, if they do not want to stay for the whole meeting, might they join just a part of it? And that could be a time when they have an opportunity to talk with the group about their wishes. I think we can all understand, particularly for those marathon types of IEP meetings, that they can be too long for all of us, let alone young adults who aren't used to sitting in meetings, although they're used to sitting in classrooms. So again, the IEP is really an important tool that can be used to develop a plan within schools and to draw in other important agencies and providers who might be really an important part of supporting that IEP plan. And then, as I said, it's really important to be thinking about what courses that young adult is taking and make sure that they put them on a path to the next step. So for example, if they are planning on attending technical college or attending a college or other type of post-secondary education, are they taking the classes they need to meet those graduation requirements and to meet those entry requirements into the next level of education? And if you're not sure, then probably err on the side of taking those courses that would be needed to meet the graduation requirements and the entry requirements to the next step. So for example, if the technical college requires a basic math course, it may take more than 1 year to complete that part of the math curriculum, but it should certainly be considered and included if that's an important step to achieving the outcomes that that young adult has. Then something else to think about and to talk about together is whether or not to graduate at age 18. And again, as we said, a young adult can participate in graduation with their peers, but does not have to actually receive a diploma. Some families have had, some schools haven't been clear about what the flexibility is for young adults with disabilities to participate in graduation without getting a diploma. There is a DPI bulletin about this that outlines clearly what schools can do and allow. So if you've heard that your young adult, for example, cannot participate in graduation without getting a diploma, that would be incorrect. They can. And then other parts of the discussion related to graduating at 18 is, are there unmet educational needs? So are there unmet goals in the IEP that would need time after age 18 or that time between 18 and 21 to work on? So for example, does that young adult use an augmentative communication device? And do they know how to use it in settings other than a classroom? So for example, can they use it to take the bus? Can they use it in a work setting? You might ask, does that young adult know what they want to do when they graduate? If they don't, then some of that transition IEP might focus on exploration of different careers and learning about those opportunities. It could include taking an online course, for example, if there isn't a course available in that school district to learn more about their area of interest. If they think that they're interested in employment but have no idea what they would like to do, they could sample different kinds of employment settings. And if some skills are needed or identified through that experience in order for them to be successful in an employment setting, then that could also become part of the IEP. Similarly, if they're interested in post-secondary education but have no idea if they can negotiate that environment and post-secondary education, they could take one class in a post-secondary setting to learn more about and to acquire some of the skills that would be needed in that setting. So those are all examples of things that might be considered and might be part of a transition IEP. More and more we're seeing youth spending time outside of the school building and in the community, exploring those work and community opportunities that they would be doing once they graduate from school. You wouldn't expect to necessarily to see all the transition goals met in a school building. It's very reasonable to expect that some of those would take place in the community. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be thinking about work after high school. So what is that young person going to do once they no longer go to school every day? And it might be a combination of things such as volunteer opportunities, pursuing lifelong learning in areas that are of interest, as well as employment. And so experimenting with that, learning about it, with the support from a school district can be very, very helpful. I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten from families who have a young adult who wants to work, doesn't know what they want to do, needs help exploring careers, and they have graduated from school. So they no longer have access to the wonderful resources that schools can offer as kids work through some of their transition goals. So really, really important to be thinking about how to explore these kinds of opportunities while the support of school is still available. I mentioned post-secondary education. There are growing opportunities available for young adults with disabilities, whether intellectual or otherwise, to participate in post-secondary education. So, for example, there are programs that have been designed at some of the colleges around the state, as well as some of the technical schools, that are specific to young adults with an intellectual disability so that they can begin to explore what post-secondary education is like, receive the kind of supports that they would need to be successful in that setting, and be doing what their age peers are doing. So you sort of have a match between having IEP goals for that purpose and then a receiving institution, educational institution, which also may have a program that's structured to meet some of those needs. So that's something to be looking for and thinking about. Young adults who participate in post-secondary education, once they graduate from school, no longer have access to the kinds of supports you might have seen in school settings, but there are accommodations available to young adults with disabilities in post-secondary settings. So for example, a young adult attending the technical college, and I would say the technical colleges have wonderful supports for through their Office of Students with Disabilities that assist people who need accommodations in those settings. So for example, if a young adult is not able to take notes, they can ask for an accommodation that provides a note taker. If they need help with tutoring for classes, many of the technical colleges have a very robust tutoring supports available. Oftentimes they will pay another student to be a tutor in that subject for that young adult. There is a wide variety of assistive technologies available, and the school will purchase those technologies. So for example, if someone is not able to read text, there are programs available that convert text to speech so that that person can hear rather than have to read material. And there are also, in some cases, people available who can read textbooks to an individual if that would be helpful. So, and the technical colleges will help with finding technology that might meet that individual's needs, as well as providing some of the supports. And then other things to think about and explore are what are the natural supports that all students participating in that environment might be utilizing, such as things like study groups, or people who just pair up and help each other figure things out. You know, you go into a computer lab and you see people moving back and forth and helping each other all the time. And that's not something that's formally organized by the school, but that anybody in that environment might be sharing in. So again, look for offices of disability services in institutions of higher education. Find out what kinds of supports are available. In many cases, that the young adult will have to meet some sort of, have some sort of disability determination in order to access those accommodations, sometimes but not always, so that's something to be aware of and to inquire about. But I think that the idea of thinking about and pursuing lifelong learning for anybody, because it's something that all of us as adults think about, that's something that is just as important for our young adults, no matter what their disability is. So thinking about removing barriers to that opportunity, starting early by what their sort of the classes they choose, and then keeping those doors open as you think about the transition and what kinds of things might be explored in that transition process can keep those doors open to young adults. So with that, again, we have additional materials that will give you a lot more information about these opportunities and some of the things to be thinking about.